Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing. I even know why I'm here, goodness me. Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Tuesday the 15th of July. I'm Stephen Ridgway, at least I hope I am. There is a critical remote code vulnerability in Symantec's Endpoint Management Platform. The CVE is CVE 2025 5333. Severity is critical. CVSS score 9.5. Affected versions are 8.6.x, 8.7.x, and 8.8. The mitigation to the vulnerability is to ensure that port 4011, I'm assuming that's TCP port, not UDP. But port 4011 is closed on the notification server firewall because officially it doesn't need to be open. Well, okay, there's plenty to unpack there if you chose to. But firstly, it's a simple mitigation. There isn't a patch available right now. Later versions or newer versions, I believe, will be released that are not vulnerable to this particular exploit. So it's would allow for privilege escalation and would allow the device to be used as a lateral movement vector. The vulnerability is on the service listening on port 011. Sorry, 4011. What a morning I'm having. 4011. So if you deny traffic to that particular port, that is a sustainable workaround until root cause is fixed in later patched versions. The interesting thing is, if the server doesn't need to listen on 4011, why is it listening on 4011? If you think about it, yes, okay, network traffic least privilege, don't present ports to the network, or especially not to the internet, that you don't need to present to the network or the internet. Because it just means your threat landscape management is more complicated. You've got more things out there. If you don't need it to be visible, well, don't make it visible. The other side of it is, if you don't need it, why is it open anyway? So certainly worth having a little think about if you are using Broadcom Symantec's Endpoint Management Suite. This is the thing, by the way, which was previously known as Altiris, and used to great effect in the past. Was a very cool tool. Don't know how cool it is these days. Probably 10 years ago probably even longer actually. But it was a very good management platform for endpoints. Presumably still is, and presumably is still the sort of thing that you find in generally larger, better run organizations. So if you are using what used to be Altiris, definitely have a look at this and check that your devices are protected. Okay, Louis Vuitton has been hit. So Louis Vuitton UK has been hit by a cyber attack. It is the third breach of that particular group, LVMH, in the last 3 months. So if you are, as they say, luxury fashion house, if you are a customer of Louis Vuitton, bear in mind that the certain amount of PII has been stolen. So the date of the breach was the 2nd of July. So the announcement in the press is coming a couple of weeks after the actual breach. It looks like names, contact details, and purchase histories have been leaked. Financial data hasn't been leaked as far as they can tell. So if you are a customer, be aware that there will be, undoubtedly, you will be targeted for phishing attacks. And given the fact that Louis Vuitton stuff tends to be sold to very affluent people, the likelihood is you would be a good target for financial scams, because you presumably have, if you can spend that much on a handbag, you've got money that's worth nicking. So there we go. It's been a bad year, as I say in this article. It's been a bad year for UK retailers. Some, Marks and Spencer's, Co-op Group, Harrods, and others have been targeted. The Louis Vuitton, or the group that owns Louis Vuitton, has also been, they've had a bad few months. Louis Vuitton South Korea was hit a couple of months ago, and Christian Dior, I think, was also hit, all owned by the same group, as far as I know. So yeah, if you are into your posh fashion, be aware you may now become a target for scammers. Okay, there is a vulnerability that has been discovered in US trains that could result in the derailing of trains. Now, okay, this is US based, and I know we're UK based, UK Europe based. However, the concepts, I think, are worth considering, and also given the nature of the way that industrial control systems work, if the vulnerability's been found in one train system, it's probably or quite possibly a similar system is in use in other places, although possibly slightly different implementations, but the concept is still there. So basically, US trains, they've got what used to be known as a brake van at the back. They've got a device at the back which applies brakes if the engine bit, I wish I knew my train terminology, but what used to be the engine, the bit at the front that pulls it along, is slowing down or applies the brakes, mainly because otherwise all of the momentum of the train is shunted into the then slowing engine at the front. So you apply brakes at the back, and it spreads the braking effort without effectively sort of crumpling everything up against the front. Now, the trouble is that you need to be able to coordinate the brakes between the front and the back, because clearly you don't want the back brakes on, the front brakes off, or the front brakes on, the back brakes off, or whatever it might be. Well, unsurprisingly, in this modern world, it's controlled via Wi-Fi signaling effectively by remote signaling, so that the engine at the front sends a message to the brakes at the back saying, apply the brakes. Well, it appears that there is very little in the way of authentication of the messages from the front of the train to the back of the train. So it has been demonstrated that you could introduce fake packets into that stream, which could do things like put the rear brakes on the train, even though they shouldn't be. You can imagine the catastrophic results of, imagine if you're driving your car and then somebody locks your back brakes. The skid is going to be quite impressive, but you quite possibly struggle to keep control. Well, it's going to be the same with the train. That is not going to be a good thing at all. So the CVE associated with this is 2025 1727. It is to do with weak authentication of the end of train to head of train linking protocol that would allow an attacker to input their own braking commands and stop the train, or at least potentially stop the train. Why am I bringing this to people's attention? Well, firstly, because it's kind of interesting, isn't it? It is a good example of how industrial control system security is increasingly being focused on, or industrial control system vulnerabilities are being the subject of focus for attacking groups. And it is better, I think, for us all to be aware of this stuff. If you're developing solutions in this space, then hopefully you can see the advantage, you see the usefulness of being able to see where things have gone wrong in the past and be able to avoid this stuff in the future. There will be some potential technical challenges to overcome in order to exploit this. I mean, presumably you have to be within a communication distance of the train, but given the fact that certainly American trains tend to be, cargo trains tend to be very long, freight trains tend to be very long. If you were stood by the side of the rails, there's going to be quite a lot of time whilst the train is passing you, and you can make an assumption that the wireless network that encompasses the front and the back of the train, it needs to be strong enough that the messages can clearly reach from the front to the back and back to the front. So if you're effectively sort of stood still in the middle as the train goes past you, you could inject packets into that without too much difficulty. So it isn't that you would have to be on board the train, as far as I can see with this, or certainly that's if I was wishing to do nasty things to trains, that's something that I would be testing. The takeaway messages are, if you're developing stuff in this space, not necessarily this space specifically with trains, but in the industrial control system space, make sure that you understand the security of the communications between the front and the back, or of something, or between two components, or whatever it might be. Don't allow for injected network packets to effectively disrupt the service that you are working on. And the second thing is, just as a general point, we all need to be aware of the fact that we are living in a world where technology is used, and yes, it's clever, but I think one could argue that the previous system, which I'm making a little bit of an assumption, but previously I would assume that you created a network by, when you join the wagons or whatever to a train, you are joining together a whole load of stuff, and presumably they had a front to back type network that was physical and connected through the things that you plug together when you join wagons together and put an engine and a brake van on the train. So maybe it's simplified some production costs. Maybe it's reduced the cost by a few bits of copper and some connectors. But in the process, if it's introduced this level of architectural weakness, you've got to question whether it was a good use of technology in the first place. Or at least that's my thoughts on the matter. Okay, a couple of things to finish up with. Unsurprisingly, researchers have jailbroken Grok-4, which is Elon's AI. Got launched 48 hours after being launched. It has been persuaded to divulge information about how to make Molotov cocktails. 67% of the time it can be persuaded to tell you how to make a Molotov cocktail. 50% of the time it will tell you how to make methamphetamine. Oh dear. Now, we all know that AI controls are difficult to implement. In this particular case, nothing clever here. This is a mixture of echo chamber and crescendo. methods. Just as a quick recap, echo chamber attacks against AI are basically attacks where you take a subject which AI has been taught is effectively taboo, but you then discuss it amongst groups of people, so that in interacting with the AI, you interact on this particular subject so much that AI comes to the, I'm going to use anthropomorphic, but it comes to the opinion that actually there's nothing wrong with this, because look, everybody's talking about Molotov cocktails. Well, you know, why can't I should talk about them as well, because otherwise, you know, I'm kind of like, I'm not in touch with what's going on, and blah blah blah. Doesn't always work. But if it doesn't work, you can then move on to crescendo attacks, which is effectively very subtly moving the conversation towards the thing that you want without triggering any of the word-based guardrails. Now, one of the curious things about this is AI is designed to kind of think, right? Is designed to have artificial intelligence. However, a lot of the guardrails put in place are keyword based. So if you can insinuate to something which has at least a reasonable semblance of intelligence, you insinuate what you want rather than using banned words, it will understand you, and it will presumably engage in the conversation, just avoiding the words it's not allowed to speak. So, you know, this is not anything particularly clever, just a combination of echo chamber and crescendo attacks. There is a nice workflow in the article from Hackreed, which we will link to the briefing, that it basically shows you at a high level how the flow of these sorts of attacks work. But yeah, be aware, Grok-4 has failed. Okay, and then finally from me for today, the UK's NCSC has announced a new vulnerability research initiative, VRI, which is aiming to strengthen its relations with what they see as external, so, you know, us commercial lot, cybersecurity experts. They are looking to engage with organizations that undertake vulnerability research in order to have a more coordinated approach to vulnerability, visibility, and management in the UK. If you are an interested security specialist, you're invited to email vri@ncsc.gov.uk with your information about your skills and your focus areas, and they will get back to you. So good on the NCSC. I've often thought that despite the NCSC, I think generally do a pretty damn good job, but they do live in an echo chamber of their own. They live in a little world that is quite detached. They don't understand it is, but it genuinely is quite detached from the realities of the commercial world in the UK. They are very public sector focused. It is good that they kind of realise they've got to reach outside that. I think they just don't realise quite how things in the real world work, but that is a problem with the government and public sector in the UK at the moment, and let's not start on that one. So that's all from me for today. Hope you have a good